Good tidings to all of the beings who are watching this channel. My name is Komori, and I welcome you all into the deepest recess of Dane's mind, a place where horror always conjures up. Today, we shall be listening to our friend, a visitor who visits those in their dreams, one Miss Lady Nightmare. I hope you all enjoy this video, and that you will have the pleasant dreams at the end, or the best of nightmares hearing her voice. Lady Nightmare, I see that you are here with quite the stories to tell. Why don't you tell me with your first one?
No, I can do it.
Alright then.
It just takes a bit of practice.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've done this. Actually, it's kind of the first time I've actually done a story rather than a song.
Do not worry, we're all simple guests here in the recess of the mind.
That I know, and I thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm not allowed to invite uninvited guests when it comes to his mind. So I'm pleased to see you're here, regardless of the invitation. Now,
Uninvited guests are the best kind.
indeed they are. Now, the story. I would like to hear this.
Ah, yes. Tonight, my darlings, I introduce to you a story of, well, creepy proportions and tantalizing mystery. I hope you enjoy. I still don't know who came home that night. This story isn't as scary as other stories, but I still get strange chills when I think about it. It happened 2 years ago. I was 14 then. I lived in an apartment with my parents and still live in the same apartment with them. To understand the story, I will have to give you a picture of my house. My room is almost right next to the main door. So when my door is open, I can see whoever is entering or leaving the house. After the entrance, there is a corridor leading you to the other room. When this incident took place, I was studying for my finals. The door to my room was left open for some reason, and it was around 6:30 p.m. My dad had decided to go for a jog, and my mom was still stuck at work. My mom always spends extra hours working, and my dad always goes for a jog in the evening. So this was nothing unusual. My dad would come back home with my mom when she returned from work. I didn't want to get disturbed while studying, so I asked my dad to take the house keys with him. This way, he could unlock and lock the door to leave or enter whenever he wished to without distracting me from my studies. After about an hour, I heard the main door unlock. I assumed my dad was home and looked up the entrance of the house. Sure enough, my dad was home. I didn't see his face, but he was wearing the same gray shirt and black sweatpants. But I did not see my mom enter with him, which was slightly weird, but not too weird. I asked my dad if my mom was home, but he did not answer me. I started walking towards the master bedroom. I didn't think much of it. My dad has a habit of unintentionally ignoring people sometimes. It was really hot that evening, and I assumed he wanted to get in the shower as soon as possible. So I shrugged it off and went back to my studying. About half an hour later, I heard the door unlock again. My mother has a pair of house keys with her, too, so I assumed she was home. I looked at the entrance of our apartment to greet her, and sure enough, my mom was home. But she was talking and laughing with someone. That's when I saw my dad enter with her. He was wearing the same gray shirt and black sweatpants. I was confused. It was extremely strange how I did not notice him leave the house again. I would have definitely heard him leaving the house if I didn't see him leaving. I felt extremely cold at that moment. I have never felt so cold before. It was like my bones and vessels were freezing from the inside. I asked my dad if he had returned home earlier, and he shot me a confused look and asked me what I was talking about. I know I wasn't hallucinating when I saw my dad enter earlier. So if he did not unlock the door and enter our house, who did? It's been 2 years, and it doesn't sound like a big deal, but for some reason, I get uneasy and uncomfortable when I talk about this incident.
My. A young lad who seems to be seeing double at his home. I wonder if the first man did enter, maybe it could have been another being, a doppelganger perhaps, waiting for him to one day lower his guard, to be slain like the beings who sleep without rest.
Better yet, he may still be in the apartment.
I like a story with such a terrifying ending with no resolution.
Indeed.
I see this new story that you've given me. People that were washed up on the shore of my island community. Mind if I take the lead on this one?
Go right ahead.
Have you ever just sat on a beach, watching the waves crashing to the shore and retreating back out to sea? Have you noticed driftwood or shells being dragged back out, not knowing where they would end up next? Every morning I sit here, looking out into the ocean where the gray sky meets the dark water on the horizon. I wait to see one of them wash in the tide, drifting up onto the hard-packed sand. As soon as I see them, I run from my position, grabbing them and dragging their limp bodies further up the beach, laying them to rest in the soft sand near the brush-filled dunes. That's when I set to work. It's a ritual I've performed since I was a child, being trained by my father just like his father did for him. I looked down at the naked body, always different, sometimes a man, sometimes a woman, ranging from a younger adult to decrepit and old. Some have been thin, some obese. Once the drifter was missing a leg, making this ritual difficult to perform in its entirety. I make do, though. I lay them on their back, feet facing land, and head to the water, their arms stretched out to their sides in a crucifix position. I know I have to work quickly before they wake up. I've never had the misfortune of seeing it before, but I've been told stories of what happens if they wake before the ritual is complete. The entire island could be erased in the blink of an eye. Generations of work, my bloodline, all for naught. I'm getting distracted. Sorry. The ritual. While in the crucifix position, I start the runes. Beginning with each hand and foot, I carve the same sequences going inward towards the body, from the tips of the fingers and toes, moving counterclockwise from left hand to feet, and finishing with the right hand. The work is methodical. My knife moves with a determined precision, honed with 20 years of practice. Their blood flows blue, staining the sands with an almost neon hue. A scent of ammonia lingers with it. When every limb has been carved, I start at the top of the head, moving from the small bump in the middle of their forehead down to the chest. They bleed much more when I get to the neck, as one of the wounds must cut right across the jugular. Their blood sprays, leaving a shower on the surrounding sand. Some days it mixes with the drizzle of rain, creating a bluish mist that floats across the beach. Finally, the runes are finished. The ritual is almost complete. I lay my hand down and wipe my hand across the drifter's throat, making sure I have enough blood to finish. I swipe their blood across my own forehead, leaving a horizontal line above my eyes, then drawing a vertical line under each of my eyes. This is my war paint. I alone stand against these terrors, protecting my island community, and by extension, the world. The preparations are done. I pick up the knife once more and walk to meet the crashing waves. The final step. My hands dip under the salt water, opening with my palm up. The waves crash in, and as soon as they begin to be pulled back into the sea, I swipe the knife across, letting my own blood flow freely and mix with the water. This is the final offering, the plea to whatever gods rule over this sea, to end this monstrosity and keep us safe. My apologies, by the way, for my stuttering. Being in such a weak host, I tend to pick up the same speech patterns. The salt water stings as I bring my hand back up, the cold air adding to the pain. My feet slide across the sand as I walk back to the drifter, lifting the knife, still dripping with the mix of my blood and salt water. I plunge it into the middle of the drifter's chest, into the diaphragm. The same reaction every time. Their eyes snap open, a final desperate gasp for air, all in vain. I've severed the muscles that allowed them to draw breath. They slowly drown as whatever blood is left in them fills their lungs, screaming curses in a language I don't understand. When the ritual is done and the last spasm goes through their body, I grab the can of gasoline and the herbs I keep in a small shack on the beach. I douse the body, setting it alight and throwing the herbs on top. Like sage for cleansing spirits, the bundle of lavender and catnip smolders, sending wisps of their scent through the air. With this, the drifter is cleansed and the island safe once more. I head back to the village, taking the beaten path carved into the brush by the generations before me. I exchange nice pleasantries with others as I pass by. They thank me for what I do, protecting us from the drifters. I simply nod, telling them it's my duty, nothing more. I make my way to the village square, heading into the courthouse at the other end. Briggs, our mayor, is waiting for my daily report. He looks up from the papers he's signing as I walk into the room.
Raleigh, how are you today? Any happenings at the shore?
He shuffles the papers aside and leans back in his seat, motioning to the chair across from him. I sit down in the stiff leather chair, hearing it squeak under me. There was one. Older. Male. They're coming more often these days. This is the third this week. When I started 20 years ago, we got one every 2 weeks or so. Should we be worried, sir? His brow furrowed with worry. He was an older man, at least 60. He had lived on the mainland for a while before coming back to the island in his younger years, world-weary and in disbelief at what we had to worry about compared to the outside world. They knew nothing of the drifters, the dangers they pose to our world, the heretic god they serve.
Well, certainly we need to keep an eye on it. The records show the more show up preceding times of trouble, the less we have a record preceding the Black Plague. They were at an average of 2 drifters per day, the highest number being 5 washing up at once. Your post was manned by 5 watchers around the clock, making sure none went uncleansed. We must be vigilant, making sure this doesn't become a problem like then.
Do you think there could be something terrible on the horizon? I asked. I was the only one trained in the ritual. My father had me to help when he was my age, and his father and brothers before him, but I was alone. I had taken no wife, had no living children, and my only brother was killed as a child. If they began washing up more often, I was the only defense.
As of yet, there's no way to tell. We simply must pay attention. Find someone from the village that shows promise. Take them to be trained. You may need help, he answered, waving me off. I got up to walk out. Raleigh? I turned back, giving him a questioning look. He dug around his desk drawer before withdrawing a long, thin blade in a black scabbard. He pulled the blade out of the sheath by a few inches, showing me a startling pristine edge with the runes I used inscribed on it. He sheathed it again and handed it over to me. This has been handed down from elder to elder. If the time comes when there are too many, use this. It allows the ritual to be bypassed. I bowed and thanked him as I took the saber. In all my research and learning about my position, I had never heard of this. We had always been told the ritual was the only way. I headed out and back to my house, lost in thought as I walked. I was shaken from my daydream by screaming coming from down the path, the direction of the shore. Raleigh! Raleigh! Vale, one of the village teenagers. She was shouting for me in a panicked voice, fear rising to overtake any other emotion. Quick! You have to get to the shore! What's going on? I stopped her as she ran up, panting for breath. She leaned over and grabbed her knees, gasping. Another one! A drifter! Some of the kids were playing in the water and it washed up! She wheezed. Shit. I didn't even wait for her to finish. When she said drifter, I took off, sprinting with all the energy I had. They never washed up past noon. Rarely ever after daybreak even. Tune one day. This is bad. If one wakes up while I'm not there, ruin would follow. Thankfully, it wasn't far to the shore. As I passed over the dunes, I saw the children gathered around it. The drifter this time appeared to be a woman, old and covered in wrinkles. One of the children had a stick of driftwood. They were using to poke at it, nudging it as the waves lapped around. Stop! I shouted, waving my arms as the children continued poking. They looked towards me, a quizzical glint in their eyes. Get the fuck away from it! It happened in slow motion. The drifter's eyes opened, their unearthly green hue, like emeralds reflecting a blue sea, shined through the haze. I saw the sharp teeth bare themselves, and the hands reach for the nearest child. Long claws tore skin, and red blood mixed with the ocean spray. I heard the boy scream in pain before turning into a low gurgle as blood filled his throat instead. I wasn't thinking. Instead, instinct took over, and I drew the blade I had just been given. The runes reflected the gray sky, the sharp edge of the blade shining like the sea. I jumped at the drifter and plunged the blade between its neck and shoulder, stabbing downward through the chest and into the gut. It let out a high screech, and the wind around picked up, intense howling echoing the drifter's cry. The ocean churned in response, sea foam churning into madness where calm, small waves were before. fucking die! I screamed. I plunged my hand down into the wound, covering it in blood and painting my face with it. I withdrew the sword, quickly slicing my palm and dipping it into an oncoming wave. The drifter screamed again. Clouds moved in, erasing any light that was left. The weather turned from a gray morning to a small hurricane in moments. I knew this had to end quickly. In one deft movement, I stabbed upward, bringing the blade out of the water and impaling the creature right in target. The screams died out along with the wind. Peace had returned to the shoreline. I sat there for a moment, collecting myself before turning to look at the gore mixed with ocean. The poor boy, his throat torn out, had passed. I took him in my arms and carried him up to dry sand before going back and gathering the drifter's body. I covered the boy with my coat and the creature with gasoline. I wanted it to feel the flames of hell. I sat and watched it burn for a while, long after the local doctor had come and taken the boy, his mother screaming in grief as he watched. I couldn't come up with words to say I was sorry. I was supposed to protect these people. I was the one that should be dead. When the last ashes had fizzled out, I still remained, thinking to myself, what could have been done to prevent this from happening again? I didn't know it would only get worse from there. My. Quite the interesting story, and there's more to come.
We shall save that for another time.
Indeed. I appreciate your visit, Lady Nightmare.
Thank you for having me.
It's quite the treat to get someone else in this head of his. My only question is, what will you do now before your next visit?
Good.
Maybe you could give some of these watchers a nice scare when they're sleeping. For those of you who stay tuned and listen to these horrific tales be told, I wish you luck in finding comfort in your homes and outside, for you never know what kind of eldritch horror could be waiting around the corner. I bid you all good tidings and a fearful night.